All right, let's get into it. We're going to explore the incredible story of how one man, really, set out to build a modern nation from the ground up. So, picture this. The year is 1947. A brand new country, India, has just been born. But it's born into chaos. I mean, immense poverty, deep, deep divisions, and the absolute turmoil of partition. The task ahead? It's almost impossible to imagine. You've got hundreds of millions of people who need a foundation, a structure, a future. Where do you even begin? Well, that monumental task fell to India's very first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. And those famous words you see there? That's him on that historic night. You see, he wasn't just another leader. He was the chief architect of this grand, totally unprecedented project. So, who was this guy? The man entrusted with this colossal project? Well, his journey didn't start in politics. Nope. It started in a courtroom. He was really forged in the fire of the independence struggle. And this is what I find so fascinating. Look at this transformation. He was educated at England's best schools, places like Harrow and Cambridge. He could have had a super comfortable, easy life as a barrister. But he didn't. He chose a totally different path. He basically traded his lawyer's robes for the life of a revolutionary. He joins up with Mahatma Gandhi, ends up spending nearly a decade, in British prisons. And by 1929, he's the one at the forefront calling for Purnas Raj, complete, total independence. It's no wonder he became Gandhi's chosen political successor. Okay, so fast forward. Independence is finally won. And now, Nehru the revolutionary has to switch gears completely. He has to become Nehru the builder. And his first job, his biggest job, was to draw up the political blueprint for a unified, stable, and democratic India. And let me tell you, his first challenge was just immense. I mean, at independence, India wasn't one single country, really. It was this patchwork of provinces and more than 500 princely states, each with its own ruler. The very first thing his government had to do was somehow weave all of these into a single nation. After that, the Constitution. And this wasn't just any document. It established a democracy and, this is absolutely crucial, it cemented secularism to protect all faiths in a country that was just horrifically scarred by religious violence during partition. All right, so you've got the political framework, but what's next? You need an economic structure, right? Something to lift millions and millions of people out of poverty and actually modernize the country. Because, let's be real, a political blueprint is pretty useless without an economic engine to make it all run. So what was Nehru's solution? He called it the mixed economy. Think of it as a middle path, somewhere between pure capitalism and pure socialism. It was a really pragmatic approach for the unique problems India was facing. The idea was simple. The government, the state, would build the massive, heavy industries. We're talking steel mills, power plants, the big stuff that the private sector just couldn't afford to build on its own. This would create the foundation, the bedrock, that would hopefully kickstart future private growth. And look at this. This chart really shows you the result. An annual industrial growth rate of 7%. You have to understand, that was a radical break from the stagnant colonial era. This wasn't just some number on a page. This was the real-world creation of a brand new industrial base that completely transformed India's economic landscape in just over a decade. But a nation is way more than just politics and economics. Nehru knew that. His blueprint was also about building a modern society. He saw education as the absolute key. So he championed not just universal primary education for everyone, but also these world-class institutions like the famous IITs and AIMS. And he didn't shy away from the tough stuff. He took on deeply entrenched social issues, pushing through some really controversial but landmark laws to give women more legal rights and to outlaw discrimination based on caste. So, with the domestic foundations being laid, Nehru then turned his gaze outwards, to the world stage. India needed a global blueprint, a way to find its place. And that meant navigating a really treacherous, deeply divided political landscape. Think about the world he stepped into as prime minister. It was fiercely divided. You had two massive opposing camps, the US-led bloc and the USSR-led bloc. And the pressure on new countries like India was immense. You had to pick a side. Are you with the capitalists or the communists? So, which way would India go? Nehru's answer? Neither. He pioneered what became known as the Third Way. He, along with other world leaders, co-founded the non-aligned movement. And this was a huge deal. It was a group of nations, mostly newly independent ones, that basically said, no thank you. We're not going to be pawns in your Cold War conflict. It was a truly bold declaration of independence on the world stage. So, Okay, after all this, the political, economic, social, and global blueprints, what's the final verdict? What is the legacy of Nehru's grand design? I mean, how do you even measure the success of an architect who literally built a nation? Well, maybe the most crucial factor in his whole legacy comes down to this one number, 16. For 16 straight years, right from the beginning, Nehru was at the helm. Think about that. That kind of long, stable leadership was so rare for a newly independent country. And it gave him the time he needed to really embed his vision of a democratic, secular, modern India, deep into the country's DNA. But of course, the blueprint wasn't perfect. It wasn't flawless. The 1962 border war with China was a devastating, brutal shock. It exposed some serious military weaknesses and was just a stark, painful challenge to his whole foreign policy of peaceful coexistence. By all accounts, it was a failure that left him personally heartbroken. But even with challenges like that, his achievements were, well, they were monumental. Just think about it. Keeping the world's largest, most diverse, and at the time poorest democracy alive and functioning, most of the world thought it was a miracle. He cemented those core ideals of secularism and scientific progress, and he carved out an independent voice for India on the world stage. The structure he built has proven to be remarkably resilient. And in the end, this is how he wanted to be remembered. Not for all the grand titles or the big policies, but as he wrote in his own will, just for his deep love for India and its people. And it was a love that, by all accounts, was returned to him in abundance. And so, that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The world has changed so much since then, and India has changed right along with it. The architect's work is done, you could say, but the building, well, the building is always evolving. So, the big question for today is, how relevant is that original blueprint now?